Hi. It's so good to see everybody. I'm really glad you guys are here, and I am very keenly aware that I am now the only thing standing between you and lunch, and that we're running a little bit behind. So I am going to try and make this relatively brief. So I'm going to launch right in. The first question that I normally get asked is, why in the hell did I decide to run for Roanoke City Council? And I get asked that question so much, but the real reasoning behind why I decided to run for City Council is multifaceted. As both a millennial and a woman, I am going to try and explain both sides of the story. For those of you who don't know, I grew up in Roanoke, and I left in 2001 for college, determined never to come back, which I am hearing that story more and more frequently, and yet here I am. I graduated from University of Michigan in Ann Arbor and moved to Brooklyn to work in advertising and marketing. And after several years in New York, I moved to Chicago thinking that it would be cheaper, and in fact, it was not any cheaper. And then eventually decided to move back here specifically to start a small business. And I think that's an important part of the story because I knew that there was an environment here that was conducive to small business, to entrepreneurship. I also knew that it was going to be a lot cheaper to live in Roanoke than it was going to be to live in Chicago. And so when we decided, my husband and I decided to start this small business, we knew that this was the place to come back and do it. From within the business community, I began to see some bits and pieces of how things work here. I began to understand the interplay of government and private business and see how the city can support or not support our local development. Over the course of the next several years, I became very interested in serving in the business community and trying to volunteer, trying to see how I could get a seat at the table. And it's something that I told, a lot of my good friends from Chicago who now have moved all around the world at this point. One of the greatest parts about being in Roanoke is that we are a small enough community that you can step up and say, hey, I really want to be involved. Now, when you step up and say, hey, I really want to be involved, a lot of times people are going to tell you, okay, great, yes, we need energy, we need people, we need what you have to offer, and yet you sometimes feel like maybe they're not actually listening. Maybe you're a warm body, maybe you are just there, to help fill a seat. So I wanted to understand more about how the interworkings really happen behind the scenes. Let's see. Do you have my slide presentation? Awesome. Okay, stop waiting to be asked. We're going to get to that part in just a minute. And go ahead to the next slide. There's a lot of people here in the community that are considered to be community leaders. And one of the things that I saw by starting to interact with some of these community leaders, a lot of them are the old guard. A lot of them have served on multiple boards. They are, rotating through some of the boards and commissions here in the city. And a lot of them, I felt, did not see the need for innovation, as a lot of these boards and commissions really have been around for decades, and they've kind of existed and moved along and been okay. So in 2010, I began to take an interest in local politics. And at that time, honestly, it was for mostly selfish reasons. I wanted to understand how politics was affecting my business. There were these people, and I didn't know who these people were, that were making decisions, and they affected what I was able to do in my business. And I wanted to understand a little bit better what that relationship looked like. As a custom bicycle frame builder, which is the business that we came back to start, the push towards reinventing Roanoke to be this outdoor community was a really important part of my marketing and business plan for our business. But who were the people that were making the decisions to push us towards this outdoor community and this outdoor lifestyle? So I like to think that I'm not a politician. Bill Bestfitch, don't you laugh. I see you sitting in the audience. Although I have been elected, so it's hard for me to claim that I am not a politician. But I think what is a more truthful statement is that I am not a typical politician. And I'm going to claim age or youth and gender as my reasoning for being able to say I'm not a typical politician. I am 33 years old. The first millennial to be elected to Roanoke City Council. Thank you, Ariel. And this is the first time that we've had two women serving on Roanoke City Council for the same 4-year term. I am not the first woman on council. The first woman on council was Mary C. Pickett, and she was elected in 1953. And I cannot imagine how difficult that must have been in 1953. She was actually quoted in the Roanoke Times at one point as saying that while she felt like the gentlemen on council that served alongside her were very kind to her, that they didn't actually listen. we have had a 100-year history of Roanoke City Council, and in that 100-year history, and our city council, for those of you who don't know, is made up of 6 seats, and the 7th seat, or the 7th vote, is the mayor. So we've got a seven-seat system. So of the 6 Roanoke City Council seats over this 100-year history, there have been 7 women. I am the 7th woman to serve on Roanoke City Council. Now, as for age, so we've kind of covered gender a little bit. As for age, I am not the youngest woman, the youngest person. I am the youngest woman, the youngest person to ever serve on Roanoke City Council either. That honor goes to Court Rosen, who was elected at age 29 in 2008. He spent 8 years on council working to make Roanoke a better place to live and work and trying to help take some of the kinks out of the system that existed. And when I asked him what the hardest part was about being young and being in a position of leadership in the city, his response was, initially, he had a hard time getting his colleagues to believe that he understood policy and that he knew what he was doing. He said there was a steep learning curve, and I think that's fair in any new position that you're going into. So, speaking to the millennials in the room, we need to understand that we are not the first young people who want to try and take the helm of the world in which we live. There have been people that have gone before us and who have paved these roads and who have made it easier for us to accomplish more at an earlier age. But our desires for collaboration and community can really only be realized by understanding the system in which we're trying to work. I, for example, have not had to deal much, Bill, with my colleagues questioning whether or not I deserve to be in the room, whether or not I deserve to have a seat at the table. They, for the most part, trust that I take an active interest, that I educate myself, and that I am there in order to contribute. And I think that a lot of that is due to having had a young person on city council for the past 8 years who proved that he was able to listen and learn and be responsive. They now understand, our colleagues, understand that a fresh perspective can add greater dimension to conversation and to policy creation. So, it is incumbent upon the millennials in the room to know and tout exactly what we have to add to the global conversation and to the world of politics that is unique and potentially valuable. So this brings me to the only real slides in my presentation. I don't know how many other people in here really hate PowerPoint, but I really hate PowerPoint. So we're going to keep this pretty brief today. There was a White House report done on millennials in 2013. And I think it's really interesting to go through and read exactly what the White House felt millennials are adding to the global conversation. Millennials are now the largest, most diverse generation in the US population. Millennials have been shaped by technology. Millennials value community, family, and creativity in their work. They have invested in human capital more than previous generations. College-going millennials are more likely to study social science and applied fields. As college enrollment grow, more students rely on loans to pay for post-secondary education, and millennials are more likely to focus exclusively on studies instead of combining school and work. So I'm going to start with the 7, and then we'll go on to the remainder, because there are 15 total. I have a couple of thoughts on these 7 attributes. So I'm going to match these up one for one. So number 1, millennials are now the largest, most diverse generation. We, as millennials, value diversity, and having a diverse group of thinkers can shed light on a given situation. Because we've grown up in more diverse communities, we seek out an unjudgmental living situation. And I think that's true for a lot of people sitting in this room, and it's one of the reasons why we see more and more millennials moving to these urban centers. Number 2, millennials have been shaped by technology. I think it's important to realize that we are working with an older generation who did not grow up with technology the way we did. They don't have the innate capacity to use technology in the same way that millennials use technology in their daily life. We use it for expedience and collaboration, and we often get bored or frustrated trying to explain how technology can help and how it can be best utilized. Number 3, millennials value community. The bottom line for millennials is not always money, and that's a real change from where we've seen our parents and older generations. The bottom line for us is trying to make sure that the most good for the most people is being done with our limited resources, and this requires us to be creative and community-minded. Number 4, millennials have invested in human capital more than previous generations. Human capital to millennials has value beyond dollars that cannot be written into a profit and loss statement. And that's really hard when you're dealing in government, when you're dealing in business, where P&L, the bottom line, your cash flow, that is king. So we have to figure out how we can communicate the value of this human capital that we value so greatly. How do we explain what that value is to the people with which we work? And number 5, college-going millennials are more likely to study social science and applied fields. Social sciences, I think, are the bedrock of a mindful community. You hear a lot of millennials talking about mindfulness. How do you incorporate mindfulness and understanding the situation from which the person you are talking to possibly has just come as you are trying to interact with them? This is something that we truly see as being an integral part of how we build this collaborative community. Number 6, as college enrollment grows, more students rely on loans to pay for post-secondary education. My explanation for this is that we are all screwed by college debt. And it's going to take our creativity as millennials to figure out how to get us out of this mess. Number 7, millennials are more likely to focus exclusively on studies instead of combining schoolwork. And I'll say it one more time, we are all screwed by college debt. If more of us are willing to work while we are in school, then we can help alleviate some of the stress. But I think it's important, a lot of us who did go to college, I think we're really told by our parents the value of a college education. And we understood that we needed to go to college in order to receive this education because we were going to go off and we were going to work in these fields that were going to be high dollar earning fields. And yet we typically are going into social sciences more and more, which are not the high-earning fields that are paying off the college debt that we have accumulated. So it's going to take creativity for us to figure out how we get ourselves out of that situation. If you could go to the next slide, we'll go on through 8 through 15 of this report. Number 8, millennials are much more likely to have health care coverage. This report was done by the White House, and they just really wanted to talk about the about Obamacare. So read everything with skepticism. I think that's really important. Number 9, millennials will contend with the effects of starting their careers during a historic downturn for years to come. Starting a career during the recession meant that many of us had to quickly become less idealistic, but we've not lost those roots amidst the rebuilding of our economy. We now focus our idealism in areas of community building as opposed to wealth building. And I think that's important. Number 10, investments in human capital are likely to have a substantial payoff for millennials. So by investing in human capital, we're creating more tightly knitted communities that will hopefully stand strong against bigotry and bias and racism and gender inequality and prejudice. And I told you I'd get through it quickly, you guys. We're down to the last page. Number 11, working millennials are staying with their early career employers longer. I think that it's, for millennials, we are trying to learn everything we can. We're trying to absorb everything we can in these early stage jobs. I think we're also really scared to go out and look and find new jobs because it was so hard to get the first job in the first place. Number 12, millennial women have more labor market equality than previous generations. So millennial women are benefiting from the work being done by previous generations to break through the glass ceiling. I think we can see that. We are learning to be more outspoken and to fight for ourselves in a way that is constructive while still trying to break down the stereotypes of what it means to be a strong female. And you can look at the current election to see examples of what it means to break down the stereotypes of being a strong female. 13, millennials tend to get married later than previous generations. So I looked at this one from my own perspective, which is as a 33-year-old female. I do have a 3-year-old child at home. For me, women no longer feel the push to start having children in their early 20s because we no longer believe that the institution of marriage is this golden halo to which we're all trying to get to one day. We don't have to rely on men to subsidize female income earnings, and we're staying in school longer. Number 14, millennials are less likely to become homeowners than young adults in previous generations. And for this, I think it's really simple. We value the freedom and the ability to roam and explore. And then number 15, college-educated millennials have moved into urban areas faster than their less educated peers. And this really just brings us back to what was the very first point in this report, which is that we value diversity and pride ourselves on developing our family units in places that encourage social growth and intellectual stimulation. It is not enough for women or millennials to stand back and say, damn the system, it's broken, and I can't work within it. And I hear that a lot from my peers. And so that's the point of what I am standing here today and say. It is not enough for us to say that this system is not going to work for us. We have to go in and decide how we are going to be able to positively affect the system and add to the system and make sure that we are able to change the system in a way that creates this collaboration, this true collaboration, and this true growth that we're all looking for. Women in particular can be expert collaborators. Some of it's learned, and some of it is innately necessary for skills such as parenting. Millennials also desire collaboration, but the problem, as I see it, is that the old guard are now talking about collaboration, and yet very few of them actually know how to do it effectively because they didn't necessarily grow up in a time where it was necessary for survival. So that's where we, women and millennials both, can step in and make a difference. We have grown up in a time where collaboration was an economic life necessity, and I think the sharing economy is a great example of that economic life necessity. What's good for just one? Why do what's good for just one when we can work together to do good for even more? So I'm going to take a second now, if you guys are ready with my clip, and we'll see if this works. I'm actually showing it off of Netflix, but there's a lady in Compton, yes, that Compton, California, named Asia Brown, who is a 31-year-old mayor. And I'm going to show this for just a second to talk a little bit about why she made the decision to run for the mayor in the city of Compton. She also, similar to me, did not fancy herself a politician when she made the decision to run, but was hoping to make a change. So if you don't mind, go ahead. And you know what, I did not screen this for curse words, and Chelsea Handler is not known for keeping her mouth shut, so I apologize in advance if there's anything on here that's inappropriate, but go ahead.
So when you moved back to Compton and you decided you want to run for mayor, what was your impetus, and what kind of message did you want to send out to all your constituents to get them behind you?
When we moved back to Compton, I actually had no intention on running for office ever. I actually went back just doing work in the community. My husband and I worked in different places and really had just spent our time doing, just building communities through ministry, working with kids. And so my profession, I had been an urban planner, strategic development, and so worked in different cities, working on projects. And when we got back to Compton, within maybe like a 4-month time period, we bought a home there, actually took a position working for the redevelopment agency in Compton. And so I started working on capital improvement projects, not necessarily focusing on the politics. Kind of one of those persons that just kind of, I believe it when I see it personally, and Compton definitely had its rap and its history of corrupt elected officials, and so.
Like they disbanded the police force there,
yes.
Right? The Compton police force in,
yes.
What, 2000?
Yes, early 2000s.
Because of how corrupt they were, so.
Because of corruption within the Compton PD, so it had gone through lots of turmoil, and it was really at an impetus. I just believe either we can go in two directions. We could either rebuild our community or continue more of the same. And so I looked for other people to run for office because after working in cities for 10 years, I knew that you have to have a really strong mayor that had a strategy, a plan, and that could really lift the city.
How does a mayor get a strategy and get a plan? You have to meet with a bunch of other people that are even smarter than you, right? And say, hey, this is what I'm thinking, now put it into a plan that's digestible for people to understand.
I think that's usually what happens, but I was the, I don't want to say smarter people, but I was the person that, Chelsea said it, not me, but I was the person that did the strategy. So I actually just met with the community. I got all of their issues, and I put together a 12-point plan that could address the needs of my community.
And it's working.
It's working.
It is
We're
working.
doing great things.
We know it's working because Compton now has 4 Starbucks, and that's always a sign.
That's a sign of
economic development at its greatest.
Chipotle's a sign, right?
Chipotle, Pizza Studio. We have just all type Petco, because people in urban communities do have pets, and so.
And how does it work with the mayoral office, your office, and the city council? Is that like your Senate? The city council, they kind of keep they're your checks and balances?
Yes, there's definitely a checks and balances system. In Compton, we're a charter city, so I actually have a vote on the council. So the majority.
How many people are on the city council?
4 other council members.
Okay, that's not too bad.
No, it's not bad.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because it really makes you aware of politics in a really different way. And I just came from kind of the outside looking in. I didn't follow politics. I wasn't a part of politics. And so I just kind of thought naively, well, we all want the same things. Well, we should want the same things to grow our community. So if someone brings a great idea to the table, we should support it because it's the best thing to do. And that just doesn't always happen, especially locally. So you got to kind of roll your sleeves up and get to work
dirty,
and
right?
get dirty, fight.
And you beat two incumbents that were previous mayors when you ran in the first
Yes.
place. So obviously you hit a chord with the people of Compton. Do you think you'll run again?
I do. I'm going to run one more time.
Good for you.
All right, thank you guys. I'll let you go ahead and stop that. So she goes on to say in this talk, and I have 31 seconds left, so I'm pretty proud of getting this all in, but she goes on to say in this talk that her goal is to get people into public service and to get people into public service back into politics. And I think that that's something that as a community here in Roanoke, we can really try and work on together as well. We have, Asia said, what I would have wanted to say to you guys. She said, you know, we have this new generation, and they do come at this from this idealistic perspective of, oh, we all want what's good. We all want what's right, right? And what I think a lot of millennials don't understand is that what's good and what's right is definitely not a black and white situation, although we tend to think it is. There is a lot of gray area in between. And where we can help to make the most difference is to make sure that that collaborative effort is being brought to the forefront of the conversation so that we start to understand that what is good for the most is going to be what is going to cause us to move the furthest forward in the years to come. Just in closing, it's not enough for us to sit back and wait to ask to join public politics or public service. Today, I am asking you all to get involved, and if you don't know how to get involved, I'm going to make a suggestion, and that is go to one of your local public meetings. Go to some of the boards and commissions. Go to a city council meeting. We've had people at city council meetings recently that have never been in a city council meeting before, and I've been able to talk to them about what happens in local government and how it really affects your daily life. We have an opportunity to change the system, but only if we as millennials and women get involved. So please don't be a naysayer and believe that the system can never be changed. We must take it by storm and simultaneously prove our worth. We are not going to be handed the keys, but we can earn them through hard work and through an honest evaluation of what we add to the conversation. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate y'all taking your time to listen to me, and it is, I think, now lunchtime.